live on our streaming, so everything you say will be for reals.
Thank you. Thanks for the reminder.
Yep.
Hello, Jody.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
You are enjoying this beautiful day, I can tell.
I'm out with my chickens in the trees.
Good for
How's
you.
that?
Good for you.
Okay. You may hear some squawking in the background, and it won't be me.
Okay. We're forewarned. So it's 5 p.m. and we have a quorum. Our quorum is building, which is good. We'll give a few more minutes, a couple more minutes. Maybe we get to 10 and then we'll begin. Jansen, Tim?
Brian, did you see Jeff, one of the Jeffs just emailed and said they're going to be late.
Okay, good.
I think it's Jeff.
I'm digging out footers right now under the house. It's an absolute mess. Ah.
So Ensign, you'll continue to watch behind the scenes? Good man. So we got Paul over at 9.
Hello.
Who will be the 10th? Which Jeff? Peggy, which Jeff? You're on mute.
Jeff Pacelli, am I pronouncing it correctly? Is going to be late.
Okay. Mark is usually a couple of minutes fashionably late.
Oh, that's right.
And Lynn did email me. I think I caused some confusion when I said see you at 5. I think people thought I was announcing a move back to in-person meetings,
Uh-oh,
which,
there he is.
and there's Mark somewhere in France.
Oh, nice, Mark.
Beautiful alley of trees there, Mark. You're on mute.
I'm always on mute when I come on. Yeah, so I like I like how the car is parking. I'm actually not even sure what country this is, but
Oh.
it should be Charlottesville.
Did I send it to you? No, it's similar to a picture I sent out in Provence where the
It
car
might,
right by in between the trees in the street.
it might be, Peggy. That's maybe where it came from, but I love it too.
Yeah, I'll send you mine. It's not as pretty as that, but makes the point.
Yeah, little known fact about parking spaces is actually they got their name because the area that they park is usually what was used to be called the park. Literally, the trees along the street was considered the park, and they parked in the park space of the street, and that's how it got their name.
Fantastic. You made my day.
Okay, good number. I will call the September meeting of the Tree Commission to order. First order of business, you all received the August minutes, had a chance to review them, I hope. Are there any corrections, additions? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking, so that tells me that we can go ahead. Is there anybody move to approve the minutes?
Move to approve
Hanson
the
moves.
August meeting minutes.
I second.
Paul seconds. Everybody nods their heads. Minutes are approved. Thank you. I wanted to catch us all up on where we are in terms of the annual calendar. So last month we did manage to do some of the scheduled August items. Then we pushed the discussion of the data until Mike had a chance to finish collecting, and then Brian put it into the charts, which you've all received. So we're doing that today, and we had hoped that we would also talk about draft language, the narrative that would be part of the presentation to council at some point this fall, or perhaps late fall, we'll see. We don't have that narrative, but we do have, I think, a lot we can discuss today on the data. We can go through the graphs and we'll talk about that today. Next month, we would be approving the work of the Education Advocacy Committee on drafting the report. Obviously, that'll be likely pushed back a month. Today, we will go back and discuss. We won't, I'm not sure Peggy will lead us through a discussion of where we were back in last fall and winter and the whole series of tree conservation, the nominees. So that's a scheduled September item, and Mike has presented us and will have a chance to comment on his final tree planting list and schedule. So I note that because we are catching up. We're a little bit behind on some things, even though we had months-long hiatus, but we are catching up on our calendar. And if we can continue to meet like this virtually, we will be fully caught up by the end of the year. We can then look at the calendar, and it was a final draft, but we talked about actually moving some things around, so we can have that discussion later. But notwithstanding the pandemic, we are in good shape in terms of the calendar. Obviously, we are still restricted in the things we can do on site and participating and working together. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. But so it's sort of a mixed bag of good news, some progress, and also some things that are hindering us. Future meetings, we were approved to do a meeting in September and October. So we have scheduled the October meeting, as you know, for October 28th. We will go forward with that meeting unless something were to change radically, which I don't anticipate that happening. I did want the commission to know that on October 6th, council will be having a work session on all boards and commissions. Peggy and I will join that meeting. I'm not sure what the agenda is, but I'm hoping that there'll be more clarity going forward in terms of just perhaps a blanket approval for continuing virtual meetings. I don't expect that we're going to be moving into in-person meetings, but so we'll know a little bit more in a couple of weeks and be able to share that with all of you so that we can plan beyond October, but we can count on an October meeting. Two more items in my report. The first is well, actually, let me reverse what I was going to talk about. We are working on and have been working on moving towards some kind of a Dropbox or a commission's own Google setup so that we can begin posting all of the agenda and all of the materials for the meeting there rather than sending it out in multiple emails. I know for some of you that some of the emails got lost along the way. And so if at any point we start referencing a document and you don't see it, I apologize for that. I think you should all have everything you need at this point, but we had actually been talking about this in terms of orienting new members. So back in February and March, the idea was we'll set up some access point where we can all go, and especially for new members. We did achieve through, with thanks to Roxanne White, we are using her Google setup right now that is hosting all of the documents that we shared with the new members, but we need to migrate to our own, and so we'll be working on that. I want to do that before the next meeting so that actually we have this all set up. The other thing is that there are some, and I know some of you have pointed these out to me, and I've worked with Mike on some of this, but there's been some confusion because we have multiple pages for the tree commission. We have a page through the urban forest page through Parks and Rec, and we have a page that is sort of the boilerplate page for all the boards and commissions. We've been working on, and I think we need to keep those two pages, although I wonder if one should point to the other so that regardless, there are still some discrepancies. People have pointed out to me on those pages. We really need to get those worked out. On the Parks and Rec page, it is updated to show Peggy and I, our chair and vice chair, but the new members are not listed and the old members who've gone off are listed. And so some of you have gone to that page and seen that and said to me there's some confusion, some mistakes. On the page is sort of the boilerplate boards and commissions page. Paul is still chair, which I've been tempted all these months to go by that page and make Paul chair again. And then we have the new members, but we have some discrepancies. So we really need to get that clear. And my concern is that living in this virtual environment where we actually are having more people take an interest in the work that we do, not just us, but other boards and commissions, that we really need to get our virtual house in order and our online house in order. So I've heard from a number of you. Mike has addressed this, made some changes, but I'm committed in the next week that we will get all of that cleared. There is also some confusion, which Sean Tubbs pointed out in his weekly newsletter, his PEC newsletter, that for some reason we appeared as the Tree Advisory Board, and a number of people wondered if that was something different from the Tree Commission. So there has been a correction. We are this month listed as the Tree Commission, but I did note today that we are the Tree Advisory Board for the October meeting. It's small things, but again, when people go looking for us, I think we want to make sure that they can find us easily. The last thing, excuse me, is that our minutes, I think I'm correct about this, our minutes and our agendas, you used to be able to go to the boards and commission page and you could find our minutes and a link to our minutes and agenda. Now, I know that you can do that from the Parks and Rec page, and I'm saying this all for a matter of record, so Mike is listening and we're all getting clear on this. I know that from the Parks and Rec page, at least, you can go to the new system where all boards and commissions minutes and agendas live, which is great. There has been some confusion, and I will confess, having been one of the confused people, that when I went there, I wasn't thinking Parks and Rec, I was thinking Tree Commission. I should know, we all know that we work with Parks and Rec, but that might not necessarily be clear to somebody who's coming to look for the minutes and agenda for the Tree Commission. And then there is in that list, that drop-down list, it says other boards and commissions. So I clicked there and I didn't see us. So I wanted to say to Mike, hey, we need to be added. Again, I don't know, we can work around that, but I think we need to sort of, if somebody asks you, like, how do I find out about you? You look at your minutes, your agenda, the packet and all that. We need to remind them that we're part of Parks and Rec. We work at Parks and Rec. We advise Parks and Rec and Council. So that's where you would go to find our minutes and agendas. It's just sort of one more link to get to us. Last time I checked within hours of getting off this meeting, and I haven't checked since then, so I don't know how many people have gone and looked, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that on both Facebook and Twitter, we had at least several hundred views on both within hours. And I think I checked the next day and it was up to the high 300s. I don't know if those are, I'm not savvy enough to know if those are multiple views. People are going back. They enjoyed it so much they came back to watch it for another 2 hours or what. But suffice it to say that the Tree Commission, and I'm sure this is true of all commissions and boards, has never been more popular. That's wonderful. And I hope that people keep tuning in. I welcome the public if you're listening or watching. We actually appreciate the interest and the transparency, and we're committed to do everything we can to make that as easy as possible for the public to follow us. Last thing in my report is I wanted to follow up, and I may turn it over to Paul and or Jody, but Paul to begin. You all received comments, extensive comments that were filed for the project Stribling. And maybe Paul, I know that obviously Jody's on the Planning Commission and he takes every opportunity to do all he can for trees. So he might want to say something, perhaps not, but Paul led the preparation of those comments. And for the benefit of those who were not involved, I don't know, Paul, if you wanted to just give like a 2-minute summary. People have had a chance to read the comments, but sort of the outcome of that meeting.
Sure. This is related to the development at the end of Stribling. It's a pretty significant building by right. I think they have, I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but it's roughly 40 some units they have by right. And what they have proposed is 150 units or so. But it's a very dense site, and it's also completely canopied. And so there were concerns just generally, well, there was the overarching concern about it's right next, there's a lot of steep slopes on the site, and it's right next to Morse Creek. And so it's one of the few remaining 10-acre sites of just trees right next to Morse Creek left in the city. And it seems like this would require a steep slope waiver to get this approved. And steep slope waivers are really supposed to be there to prevent environmental destruction, and sort of other issues. But then the other issue is that it's located at the end of a street with zero infrastructure to support pedestrians. It's also not a really, the proximity is not really walkable. It's more than 10 minutes away from any convenience stores or any bus stops or anything like that. So while this site is going to get developed regardless, we just had a number of concerns about it. Namely just the protection of Morse Creek and some of those existing trees, as well as how do you really provide safe infrastructure for this community. So those are not all totally Tree Commission purview, but I think those comments were well heard. And Jody had a lot of great and really thoughtful observations as well that he brought up throughout that I think led to the, if I'm, Jody, you can correct me here too, but the outcome seemed to come that the Planning Commission said, well, this can go forward if you can do the infrastructure to get people there, safe infrastructure. And because that is a project in the many millions of dollars to get that infrastructure to go to that site. And while the developer was willing to sort of commit 500,000 to that, that was really a small drop in the bucket compared to what it would really cost to get infrastructure to this site. So the Planning Commission realized that was a need to actually, if you were going to approve all this density at the end of a sort of sidewalkless street with a lot of walkers already there, it's already a part of a sort of typical running route along the Ravenna Trail and such, that it's that they do a little more from the city standpoint to up that street. Is that, Jody, does that kind of capture the outcome of that? Yep. So
I will say that the planning commission in general is not against the density.
Correct.
The planning commission is very much in favor of the need for housing in the city. It was just unconscionable to allow that kind of dense development at the end of an undeveloped street that was going to put the population at risk.
Great. Yeah, that's very helpful to point out too. The density, yeah, planning commission and council want to create public, available new housing for people, and particularly reduced rate housing. So.
Thank you, Paul and Jody. Any questions about those comments? That was a good effort. I mean, that was a sort of a round robin group effort on the part of a number of members working individually, not as a committee, but working individually and adding their input. So I was, hopefully we'll have more opportunity to do that. So thank you.
And it's helpful to note, we did comment on that same project a year ago with very similar comments that had no real traction. And I think this round, it did receive a lot more traction. So I think that was helpful for everyone's input into the actual document we submitted was a little more robust this year. So thanks to everyone.
And I don't think we had nice pictures last time. Did you have those nice pictures on there?
No, I didn't. Just text. Pictures help.
Pictures help a lot. So thank you both.
Ryan?
Yes.
Since I'm new to this effort, I'd like to just get a little understanding about the planning committee and wondered if they had any concerns about the steep slopes and about the canopy itself in terms of consideration, or are they only interested in providing additional housing?
Jody, you can go ahead.
It'd be an overstatement to say that's the only thing they're interested in. Let's just say that was the main reason that rose to the top, and we couldn't get past that one to even look at the proposal in more detail. One of the things that was pointed out was in the proposed planting plan, the development was ringed by a wall of magnolias to create a barrier between this new development and the surrounding properties, whereas it's quite explicitly said in the PUD requirements that it's to be integrated with the surrounding properties. So that was another thing that was brought up. So there were a number of issues brought up, but like I said, we really, the discussion really did not get farther down into the smaller issues and could not get past the bigger issue of the street and the risk of this development, this density of development at the end of the street.
And it's also important to note to that. I mean, the goal of, we're not here to protect every parcel of private parcel of trees. We really have no right to those. Those parcels, they can do whatever they want to that development. So there's no one jumping in to conserve this property. It's not a highly prized one. So there is a value in building communities in our forests that are privately owned, so they're not going into Crozet or going into the county and disturbing green property. So we just want to make sure we're protecting what we are expected to protect, and that is really the Morris Creek and the existing trees in that design. So we're not really ever against that, especially on private property. We really have no right to ever be against that. So,
yeah. Very good point. Any other questions or comments? So now we will move into member reports. We have a number of things we want to discuss tonight. The largest one is the data that you received in the charts and graphs that Mike has worked with Brian Daly, who does all of the putting together, taking the numbers and putting them in that form. I just wanted to, particularly for new members, I just wanted to preface it before I turn it over to Peggy, because she worked with members of education advocacy to review this. For the new members, just to give you sort of a 1 minute history. When I joined the commission, and I know Paul could also chime in, but I know when I joined the commission, there was a data committee, and it was a multi-year effort supported by members of the commission, passionately espoused by Roxanne White, and worked for several years at least with Mike and with others in Parks and Rec and the data people to come up with a series of metrics that we could not only use to track the health of the urban forest and efforts on the part of the city for ourselves, because obviously that's important, but going through and pairing through a number of metrics. At one point it may have been, I can't remember, 10, 12, 15, there were a lot, and deciding which ones were the most important for us to be able to track and to show, and especially to be able to put into an annual report to be used in multiple instances, but it is an annual report to council. And so particularly for new members, I just wanted you to understand that what you're seeing is sort of a multi-year effort getting to the point where we have this data to show to the public. And with that, I will turn it over to Peggy, who can tell you a bit about the work of the committee and also about some work that they've already done on the data that you're seeing. So there's some updates, but I'll leave that to Peggy. Thanks.
Peggy, you're on.
Bottom left.
All right. Sorry. We did not get the charts in time to really get review by the committee individually, get back to me. So, these are preliminary charts. And I think, as Mike has said, the text is not up to date. And there's some other things. We do not have the financial chart, the capital improvement plan chart. So keep that in mind. We want to get your feedback if you have any thoughts, and I'll talk individually with the committee members and get these charts in better shape and then get them back out to you. But Mike, are you going to share the screen, or do I?
Actually, if you need me to.
I mean, I can do it, I think, if you want. I'd have to. Should I?
Yeah, probably best for you if you're going to be speaking to him.
Let me see. Well, let me see. I don't know if this is going to work. Can people see it? I might have to get you to do it, Mike.
Which one do you want to do first?
Well, I guess we'll just go through them as you sent them out, because I'd have to open them all up and decide which.
Would you like me to share my screen and just show those? Was that helpful?
Whoever. But it doesn't seem to be working here. I don't know why. I said share screen, but it didn't work.
So starting off with by agency.
Yes. So this is a chart. We have 4 years of data, and the text does not reflect FY20, this last year. And basically you can see by these charts in green that Parks and Rec is planting more and more of the trees. In past year, we've had VDOT plant some of the trees along some of the new streets, like through McIntyre Park, although I think that was in 2016. But as it is, the Parks Department is planting the biggest, by far the biggest percentage now by trees. Does anybody have any questions on that one? Okay. I'll pull up the next one, Paul.
All right, Parks and Rec tree plantings by canopy size.
All right. So one of our goals is to plant more shade trees, because if we're going to meet our climate change goals as a community, that's very important. And you can see we have made quite a jump from FY17, and we're concentrating on shade trees. And you'll see later when Mike talks about the priorities of where we plant, we've prioritized shade, where we can plant a shade tree gets a higher rating. So that is something we're always working on.
Tree plantings by location.
Okay, now this is one we think we want to work on, because now Mike has really come up with an interesting system about making priorities of where we're going to plant. For instance, planting in low canopy neighborhoods is really a goal of ours, but you don't see that on this chart. So I think it'll behoove us to change this chart because we want to track, are we meeting our goals? Are we planting the trees? I think we had low canopy neighborhoods as a high priority along trails and sidewalks. And Paul, do you remember the third one? Or Mike, what was the third high priority? Shade trees. Well, but that would go on another chart. But anyway,
Right.
yeah. So, so that's what this is doing. But I think this needs, we really need to look at this, and so it'll really track our goals. But you can see here. Let's see. You know, right now you can see the green is the biggest parks, and obviously there's more room to plant in parks.
Would you have it so that you have right of way and then you have right of way in low canopy neighborhood? Like, would you add additional clarification to right of way planting?
Yeah, we need to track what, you know, which Mike will show you later. One would be low canopy neighborhoods. Right of way is one. Along sidewalks and trails is another high category. So we'll just have to work on this chart, but I think it needs to reflect what our, you know, we need to track what our goals are.
The tricky thing though is Mike has to then track that in his system as well, which I guess wouldn't be very hard to do, right, Mike? You just, you know, assign it that neighborhood.
Yeah, that part's not that hard, but the way this was set up with collector, it essentially has a drop down, right? So we would have to go back into collector and we'd have to change it and create all these other fields when the trees are inventoried, right, in the field. So
and with the trees inventory in the field, do you know their neighborhood right now that they're in?
No, that's not collected. It would be easy to go back and, you know, we have the location, right? So
yeah, Mike, you know, we may just start that. I mean, I don't think you need to go back. That's a lot of work.
If there's a good intern, you know.
We'll talk about it, but I think it's, you know, I don't want to create a lot of work for Mike. I mean, we certainly, I think going forward, want to do that. But, you know, we'll let our committee, the Education and Advocacy Committee, and talk with Mike about, you know, whether it's easy to go back. I don't know, but it might be, but I think it seems to me we definitely want to do it going forward anyway.
Okay.
I have a question about FY20, since we see an increase in number of trees planted. FY20 ended July 31st, correct?
Correct.
So I'm just curious, like, was that the goal? I mean, I know we talked about this when you gave us the planting list. Was that sort of where we wanted to be, or would there have been, were tree plantings affected in any way by the shutdown? I guess is what I want to know.
No, so we had all of our tree planting was well done before the pandemic and before March, really. So we were able to get all of the trees in the ground with the exception of 2 that, you know, we had planned to.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
One of our committee members did ask me to ask the question in FY20, we had a much larger percentage trees planted in the Gulf. Since golf is supposed to be self-sustaining,
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fees are supposed to support everything that happens there. Should we be spending our few dollars in golf on the property and let the money that comes from golf go to that? That's a question.
Yeah, so I mean that's something we kind of discussed internally as staff, and we kind of felt that you know, it was still city property, it was still an opportunity to increase canopy, and we were trying to mitigate some removals of some trees that they had to take down as well. You know, so we're kind of, you know, improving the golf course, and we kind of think about how East McIntyre, how it was previously was a golf course, but you know, ultimately became a park and things, and we just think that it's still an investment in the community. It's a tree in golf might not be as ideal as a tree downtown, low canopy neighborhood, but we still thought it was valuable.
Well, might be valuable, but I guess the question's asked, should our limited dollars, and should it really come out of the fees of golf? So golf is supposed to be self-sustaining. We don't have to solve it tonight, but I do want to just raise that. I don't know if anybody else has any feelings about it.
Well, I didn't recall this. And did these show up on the tree planting list last year, the golf ones? They may have, I just overlooked it, but do you recall that, Mike?
Yeah, they were there.
They were there. Okay. And the golf is the actual golf course. It's not the former, McIntyre area that was the golf course, or what defines the golf? Just to,
So these trees went in the Meadow Creek Golf Course, the operational golf course.
just Meadow Creek. Okay. Yeah, I'm with Peggy. I do think that, well, obviously our priorities have already changed this year. So going forward, it seems like we're really trying to create a new priority system that I think golf would fall down pretty low on that list of requirements. So maybe we're already taking care of that, Mike. It seems like we are obviously in this next year, but going forward.
Yeah, we can, we can discuss that when we talk about the tree planting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right.
Next one.
Next, Parks and Rec, new plantings and replacements versus replacements.
Okay, so we probably should have started off with our goal of planting, but anyway, our goal is to plant 200 trees a year, and you can see we haven't done that. But this is just to show that we're basically, there's no narrative there. Well, I guess we'll see the difference between how many we're taking down and how many we're planting. This is just showing that 13%, for instance, in FY20 were actually planted to replace trees, and then 87% are new locations. So
Here's our goal at the top there.
yeah, there's the goal, 200. A couple of comments on this was that this is a little hard to read, this chart. And maybe, I think visually we can do some things to make it so the years stand out. But anyway, I think this shows that the pink is removals, the green is planting, that even though we're planting 151 trees, for instance, last year, we're taking down almost the same. And past years, even more. So that's just something to point out, that if we want to increase canopy, 200 trees is not exactly a great goal. But that's what this is showing. This chart is showing that basically we've lost canopy since 2004, 5%. We are going to do, Mike is going to be contracting with someone to do a canopy study, but that won't be finished until next spring or maybe early summer when you can see the canopy. So we'll see where we are. Our data expert there, Anson, did a quick thing using iTrees, and
it's the same tool that was done. I mean, I would say I used the same protocol from 2009 and 14, so I suspect it'll hold up.
Yeah, he showed a decrease of 3% since 2014, but we'll see. But I think it's, again, we're trying to meet our climate goals and we're losing canopy. So.
Yeah, and those percentages, I think it's important to note too, a 5% change is somewhere in the realm of 420 acres. If my math is roughly right. So it's not a small amount.
This one, some of the members had concern about. It gives a lot of information, but it's not, we want to point out to the public and council and planning commission that what the canopy coverage is in our neighborhoods. And you can see at the top clearly Star Hill and 10th and Page have under 20%, which is really an unhealthy amount. I think our committee and hopefully the Arbor Committee will work on this year a priority to look at these low canopy neighborhoods, because there's a lot of research out there. I think we've been sending, or you've been seeing about the connection between heat and health, and in low canopy neighborhoods, which often correspond with lower income neighborhoods. It's an environmental justice issue because heat-related illnesses, particle-related like asthma and strokes are documented at least across the country. Richmond, Washington, New York are much more prevalent in these low canopy neighborhoods. So Paul, so what we want to see, be able to show, can you pull up, I had it but from your presentation where you show the map, the different colors of the neighborhoods. Can you do that quickly?
Pretty quickly. Let me see here.
Not that one, but
I know. Yeah, hang on. Let me just-
I think it's a much better graphic to show people what's happening in our city.
And we showed it last week as well. I mean, maybe in the last month's report.
I know.
Peggy, I have a question. This is Jody. Is there a target
Not
percentage?
that one. Well, that's right. I meant from Paul, from the presentation where you had sort of the red Star Hill and
Oh, sure. Yeah.
and
I
then you
know.
had the chart beside it. Okay, I'm sorry, Jody.
Now I forgot. Is there a target tree canopy percentage cover that is minimal for a healthy community?
Well, in residential areas, Paul, didn't you say anything under 40 is not the goal?
So under 20 is highly stressful and highly almost you could define it as toxic. It is very high stress levels associated with under 20%. The areas, but as you increase canopy up to 40%, you get increasing reductive anxiety and stress on the way to 40%. It's a sort of a diminishing graph. After 40, you see no additional benefits of additional benefits to someone's stress levels. So the goal is really to get everyone above 40%. That would be the absolute goal. But for the ones that are the lowest, it's really work your way up from these really low. Pretty much everyone under 30% should be a high target range for how do we get some canopy to really improve those neighborhoods, and then working our way up once we sort of bring everybody up.
So if you look at that, I think there are 19 neighborhoods here, 9, almost half are below 40. So that's not a good statistic, for our community.
Will this presentation be available to us in the commission afterwards?
We
Okay, thank you.
I think, well, Brian and our committee are working on a presentation for city council. We definitely want to give it to the planning commission too. So we're hoping to be able to do that. Paul has put together a presentation, and I know there'll be some revisions to it, but it was a wonderful presentation. So, and this is included.
I just like to get this information for my next report at the next planning commission. So I'm not looking for all of it, but this especially this page, I would like to talk about the neighborhoods and tree canopy.
Well, and Paul,
this is also in the green print 1.0 document that came. This came directly from the. Sorry for the phone call in the background. This came from Public Works and the Utilities Department's plan in green print. So,
Brian, if I'm taking too long, you can just tell me to hurry up. But Paul,
No, I mean, we have, this is important, but I do want to point out if we go back to the prior one. Oh, well, that's good too. For new members in particular, I mean, there is also the issue of where we can plant, right?
And that's pretty critical because this is showing you that Star Hill has very, very little acreage. 10th of page has very little acreage. But if you look at this this prior diagram, this leads you to believe that there's a lot of land to plant in Star Hill and a lot of land to plant in 10th and page. Right. When the reality is that there is not a lot of acreage to plant in these areas. I mean, there's smaller parcel sizes and property sizes as well. But if you look at an area like Belmont, it has 123 acres of available planting zone. It's not necessarily apparent when you look at this and say, oh, they only have 15%, So there's a bit of a scale thing that you have to kind of think through as well. But this one's really helpful.
Paul, I'm glad you brought that up. And I just, at the last meeting we discussed this, I kind of voiced a concern about getting carried away with the image that shows those neighborhoods and their percentages of canopy cover without sort of cross-referencing it to something like this, lest a conclusion be drawn that there is lots of opportunity. If you look at Star Hill's possible planting area, you know, if you've come from that last map, it's easy to imagine a groundswell of public, you know,
Outcry.
outcry that we've got to plant trees here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mike, I mean, or,
And the possible planting area, we should also make a point, excuse me, Peggy, just that this is people's backyards often. This is very, very, I mean, if we actually did this map for the available right of way, there would be almost nothing in the yellow.
Right.
So there's a lot of area that we'd love to plant, but it is in people's private property. So there's not a lot of actual available for the tree commission in the city to do.
and we're working on that too, aren't we, Anson? To go back to that other chart that I kind of glanced over for a minute.
This one?
Yeah. Let me just ask, I mean, it's a lot of information and, you know, maybe we want to use it too, but when it says possible planting areas impervious, what are we talking about there? Mike, or like, what is that?
And to me, that reads as like if there's sidewalk, that could be like a sidewalk improvement project where you could create space. That's kind of what that looks like to me.
Yeah, or could it be? Yeah, it's just kind of confusing, isn't it?
Have we gone through, like, for example, Star Hill? Like, if you look at an aerial photo, like the public authority kind of property almost consists of, like, you know, 15-20% of that Star Hill neighborhood. So looking at like those chunks of properties, I would think kind of skews things a little bit. And I mean, from a commercial to residential kind of ratio, I mean, there's that one little residential neighborhood, but isn't it mostly commercial?
It is mostly commercial, really, except for that Brown Street in the park here. It is primarily commercial, but given that there is you know, potential work underway for public works to basically this city complex to maybe be redesigned and rebuilt for public housing, or, you know, public not public housing, but anyway. But yeah, Star Hill is a very, very dense urban site.
Yeah. So just go back to that one with the horizontal chart, kind of. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The one that showed the canopy and the possible planting areas. Just a minor thing here. We need to put the number of acres in those first three, that the yellow. They don't show, you know, it doesn't show you how many acres. For instance, Rose Hill, it's got to be more than 15 acres because UVA 1 is 15 acres. So we just need to put those numbers there. That's a minor thing. So I think, is that all? Have we gone through them all?
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Jody, I'll get with Paul and we'll send you the canopy map, because the one Paul in the presentation too had showed on the chart how they break down between 20%, 30% or 40%.
Oh, that's the one you wanted. Yeah.
That's okay. I think that was good. So I think that's it. Are there any feedback? I mean, again, I need to contact all the individually our members and get any comments from them, and we'll write some text too.
I really like the idea of including what neighborhoods were being planted in, so that if we were to report to council about these low, I mean, I think some way to convey what Mike is going to present later about where we're planting trees in the future, and how we're starting to think through that, and maybe even as a discussion of, you know, we realize what we've been planting in the past is sort of the low hanging fruit areas, or maybe we have, you know, basically it'd be nice to see that breakout if possible, Mike. I know it's plenty of work, but
we can, that's stuff we can generate from the data. I mean, I was gonna, right, I mean, Mike, those are all boundary lines that are in the base layers. We can totally make that available. I can, right? Yeah, I'll take care of that.
So,
All right.
and I'd be interested, Anson, in actually when working with you on it, it might take care of my concerns of misrepresentation, because
Sure.
we
We'll do it
could
in a, yeah, let's do it
just
in
look
an
at one
online.
neighborhood and look at that impervious surface and see if what we're saying as potential tree canopy is all parking lot, for example.
Sure, let's do that online, and we'll quick. Is the Dropbox going to be publicly available? Is that something we can write to? Is that, how does that work?
We'll figure that out, whether it's just commission or, I mean, it would be available to all the commission members
Okay.
for sure. I wanted to point out there's a lot of numbers and colors to throw at new members, but you're going to get another chance to look at this in a more finished final form with narrative. If we are able to actually have the report drafted next month, I hope we will, with bullet points so that you can see it better. So again, I know it's a lot, but you'll have another look at it. If there are no pressing questions or comments.
Yeah, and ideally this report would go into a document that's, well, anyway, I don't
Yeah.
have it, unfortunately, but yeah.
So we'll be working on that, and you'll be seeing another iteration of this.
Yeah, so send me any
So-
comments individually if you have anything,
Yes.
even if you're not on the Education Advocacy Committee. Okay.
Yeah, Peggy, my only one is just a question about the possible planting area here. I think this is already brought up, but there's a possible planting area, vegetative and impervious. And does that include both zones in that number there? Just how do those speak to each other?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'll talk to Mike about it.
Okay.
So we're at 10 till. We have 10 minutes left in this segment. I know that Peggy wants to just bring us up to date on the nominees for tree conservation. And I do want to take time, since Paul's done a lot of work on the master tree list. So before we get into that, I wanted to ask Mike, we've allotted you 40 minutes, and I don't want to take from you, but do you think that you can accomplish your part of the agenda in, let's say, 30 minutes or 35?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay, so we're going to go a little over here so that we can do the tree conservation and the master tree list. And so Peggy's going to remind us, because we've been at this for almost a year, so we need an update.
Yeah. All right. So Paul, can you also,
I know where you're going.
well, we want the tree nominations. One of the PDFs had the pictures of the trees. Just pull up one as I talk. I think the ash tree or something. Do you have that?
It's the PDF. I do. Yeah, 1 second.
While he's doing that, I'll just remind some of the new members. In 2013, the city council, I'm sure from pressure from the tree committee, tree commission, passed a tree conservation ordinance. And that is to protect, important trees in the city. They have we have four categories. Heritage, that's a tree that's related historically or culturally important tree. Specimen tree, that's a specimen, as is ash. Yep, that's heritage and a specimen tree. Special tree for its species. Memorial tree would be tree that would be connected, have been planted for some person or special event, and a street tree. These are all four categories. The tree commission can nominate trees, or a private person can nominate trees. If it's a tree that's not on public property, you have to get and it's on private property, you have to get permission from the owner to be able to submit it. And as I said, it goes to city. We can do it quarterly. We can submit quarterly to city council. They also will hold a public hearing before they finish nominating. So since 2013, sorry to say, we've only nominated about 16 trees. So last year we made a concerted effort to nominate more, but we haven't presented to city council. That's partially because of, we blame everything on COVID, but it stopped us in our tracks in March. So we will go through these and see where we go from here. We looked at 2 batches. This was in November. We nominated 6 trees. We'll run through them quickly. The ash tree behind the old library and also adjacent to the new, pretty close to the new library. This big ash, I can't put my glasses on, but it's approximately 5 feet in diameter, right?
Yep. It's 95 feet tall.
Yeah. So
Very
it's
nice.
and Mike has been treating it for the emerald ash borer, so we expect it to live a long time. That was the next tree. The next tree is a big elm, American elm, by Clark School, which maybe it's still being treated. I'm not sure, Mike, for the Dutch elm disease, but it's certainly in good shape. And I'm sorry, I don't have the diameter here, but anyway, it's a big tree. Mike probably has it. And I think did we have a ceremony, Paul, around that one year? Maybe this is a picture.
We did, yeah. We did every year for our Arbor Day. We usually have we pick a nice tree in town, and if it's with a school, we usually get the school kids involved and do an educational process where they kind of measure the tree and they do research on it and how old it might be. And it's kind of a fun engagement with those schools. And this is one of those. Yeah.
Okay, next one. So this is again a specimen tree. This is a post oak in Maplewood Cemetery. And it's a huge tree, 5-foot diameter again, a post oak or bur oak. We had some discussion about, we have 2 trees in cemeteries here about, what if people want to be buried underneath it in the future, would it hurt the roots? But we decided to nominate it because, first of all, a plot is only 4 feet by 10 feet. And so that's not a huge disturbance. And also very unlikely that anybody will be buried there, as Brian, who sits underneath these. Maybe is it this tree you sit underneath and enjoy it? And so very unlikely. So we still think. Oh, and the other thing I meant to mention.
And they're pretty crowded, right? I mean, there's a lot of people already buried in these cemeteries. It's not.
Yeah, and also meant to mention on the ordinance, even though these trees might be slated for protection, means you can't cut them down. The owner, including the city, is supposed to take care of them. City council can always waive if they think that it's not in the public interest or it's going to do some harm to someone. They can waive its status. So city council, even if we nominate these trees, city council can always take it away. And the other thing, the city manager, under the arborist recommendation, if a tree is dead or in terrible shape, the arborist can recommend taking it down. The city manager can agree. So there's plenty of ways to get, these are not carved in stone, even though we want to give protection to these trees. So let's see the next one. This is a sycamore. Mike and I looked at 2 sycamores, and I think this is not the one we recommended, but in Riverview Park. One was not in very condition. It might be this one, Mike. But there was another prettier one closer to the river. And so we nominated, I can't remember, it's probably close to 3 feet in diameter too.
2.7.
Yeah, but this is not the tree we nominated.
Okay.
So we nominated another one. We looked at another one. And then we don't have pictures for these. I'm not sure why. But I worked with Robin Haynes at the tree Stewart. She has they have notable trees. And so we went through all the notable trees. So there's a Shumard oak Shumard oak is not in the cemetery. The Shumard oak is along 250. It was a memorial tree for Leroy Snow at Snow's Nursery. And it's a beautiful tree and in great condition. The last one was a southern red oak, again, in another cemetery. And so that's another huge tree. You can see, might be the largest one, 5 feet, 6 inches. So we decided to nominate these trees. And, as I said, we only have about 16 trees. This would 50% more. So, but again, we have not finished the report to send it to council, but we did agree to nominate these trees. We voted to nominate them in November of last year. So that's the first part.
And here's a picture of that one Shumard oak.
Yeah, there
Yes.
you go.
Yeah, pretty nice tree there.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to note too, that after we had nominated, then the process is for Mike to go back and to do an assessment.
And Mike has done that.
And Mike has done the assessment. I think on these 6 trees, the only issue was that Mike was not prepared to recommend the 2 cemetery trees. Am I correct on that? I want to make sure.
Yeah, that's correct, and I think that was in the report as well, that, you know, staff just had some concerns about putting people in a spot if somebody owns the plot, about them having rights to open it and damage roots to a tree that's protected. It seemed like a bit of a conflict, but we were talking about different things about working through that. I think last time came up at the commission meeting, some members suggested maybe just putting that, some of that language with the exception if someone needs to open a plot and having council make a decision.
Yeah. So I think the goal here, and I don't want to step on your notes, Peggy, but I think the goal here is that for this first batch, we really ought to make a concerted effort to get this all tied up and get this before council.
Yeah, I agree.
But the question is, and this is going to be true for the annual report, you know, council has a lot of big things on its mind, and I'm not sure, I've not noticed the same kind of robust agendas with lots and lots of items. So maybe we will have to wait, but at least the goal should be for both the annual report and for this batch of nominations, we should be prepared to try to do that in this calendar year if possible.
Yeah, and I agree. We've already voted on it and
Yep.
and we have the information. So I think it's a matter of us writing a report with Mike and going forward to it. So I think we should go forward with that. You're right.
So on the other batch, so we leave some time for Paul and the master tree
We'll
list.
go through that pretty
Do
quickly.
you want to just a couple minutes on that?
Yeah. All right. So we looked in December of last year too at a total of 7, 13, 20, 26 trees. And it's not very pretty. And you probably don't need to hold that up, Paul. But so we looked at, maybe you can find a picture of the Garrett Street trees at Friendship Court.
I can.
The trees around Friendship Court, there are pin oaks and white oaks, 20 in all, on Garrett Street and 2nd Street Southeast. These are magnificent trees. They were in the Streets at Work document as an example of a well-lined, tree-lined street, and one to emulate throughout the city as we build new streets. And so we felt they needed some protection. Now Friendship Court's going to be redeveloped. And, you know, maybe some of these trees will need to come down, but we're hoping we can save some. We decided to nominate them, but we never submitted. Mike said we have to submit before we just submitted them as street trees, you know, all 20 trees, that we need to look at each one individually. So that needs to happen. We also talked about the fact of doing some outreach to the community to talk about why we think these trees are important, and just to do some education about the value of trees. You know, these are community trees. They're not Friendship Court trees, but we still want the community. I think it's an opportunity to let the community know the value of trees and how, you know, for climate, for their own health and whatnot. The other 6 trees are 6 elms along East High Street, and they're survivors. And they again are street trees. I'm afraid we don't have a picture, but we will get that. These are not ready to go to city council yet. We need to submit to Mike individual trees. It's not there. Let's see, not there. Anyway.
Going down the road.
Yeah.
Right there, right?
They're in the residential kind of there. It should be on the left.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're great trees. I don't know if are we still treating these trees, Mike, for Dutch elm disease? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, but they're not ready yet. We need to, but, and also the Arbor Committee is really supposed to be doing this. I think along with us, because we advocate, I mean, the Education Advocate Committee. So we need to work with you. But anyway, this will be our next application.
And that's going to require some socially distanced field work, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So
So,
maybe a plan could be developed to get a couple of people to go out.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're pushing to get those to council this year, so.
no, we'll do it for next year. And I know my husband can help. He has a DBH monitor and Paul can help. Maybe we can get these 26 trees.
And Peggy, I mean, because the Garrett Street ones are literally across the street from my office, I have a DVH tape and I have a camera and I could just go shoot them and document them. That's not hard. So I could actually move those ones along pretty quickly.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll plan for, if we can get the first batch, the first 6 trees in this year, that would be great. And we'll plan for early next year for the other ones.
Okay,
So
thanks, Peggy. I'm going to just, unless there are any pressing questions or comments, just in fairness to Mike, just keep moving the agenda along. Paul, can you do your presentation
As fast as I possibly can, yes.
within 10 minutes? And Tim,
Sure.
I know that I asked you to talk about comp plan, but I from our conversation, I think we can defer till next month if you're okay with that.
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay, so Paul, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. All right, clock is going. I see it. So one of the tasks of the tree commission is to manage the master tree list in the city. We gave a look at the master tree list. This was updated a couple years ago, but we noticed a number of things that we could possibly fix with this. There's a few trees that are just kind of odd choices. Some of it, it's also a little confusing. There's a lot of specificity with cultivars. And this was originally written, the first one, I think in 2010, maybe 2009. And some cultivars kind of come and go in fashion. We also have some species that have larger threats with them. So we're just trying to update this. There's also some legibility with this and how to make this as simple and clear as possible. Also, there's an Excel sheet with this that has an equation to calculate basically the height of when it goes in. So these are 2-inch caliper trees. This is the height when it goes in. Over 10 years, this data, Mike, I don't know if you know where this comes from, but I've looked all over to find out where you get these growth rates for all these trees. This is baked into our own city process, and I've just kept going with it. I haven't messed with it, but essentially this is how big it is when it goes in. This is how big it is additionally over 10 years. You add that up. And so in 10 years, you get a 30-foot tall tree. Then you do the ratio of the width to the height. This is whether if it's a very wide tree, it would be a higher number. So like a 0.9. If it's a very narrow tree, it would be 0.5, 0.6. And then this is kind of a math equation. You take, R times T, and that's these two numbers here. And then you get your total width. And then eventually you do, pi and other things, you get your average area of canopy. Why this is important is because this predicts our 10-year canopy growth. And all of our site plans in the city are required to meet a certain threshold of canopy in 10 years. So every engineer and landscape architect in the city only cares about these numbers. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are some landscape architects that care about these names and such. It's maybe some engineers, but a lot of them are really just trying to get to these numbers to get to what's my projected canopy. I have to meet our, it's a 10% canopy in 10 years for major developments, which is pretty small, but besides the point. And then, so if you're an R1, a residential project, which very rarely you're applying to a site plan process, but you would have to have a higher ratio of say 30% within 10 years. So anyway, that's why these numbers are important, but that's why also we try to keep this really clear and we keep this very visible because this is how developers use this list. So these are updates where we basically looked at certain species that we just said, all right, pecan tree, I love pecans, but if anyone can find them in the nursery trade, let me know because I want them. But they are a sort of a holdover from another generation of nursery practices where we didn't have containers, where we had bare root stock all the time. pecans could easily be transferred into nurseries. Now we've moved to pretty much a lot of containers and a lot of field grown, and you just can't grow a pecan in that same way. So it's a change in the industry. So we took that out. You don't see sugar hackberries in the nursery very often. You don't Kentucky coffee trees. Instead of just vaguely saying and cultivars, we've tried to be a little more specific with which cultivars are sort of preferred in the trade right now. So again, we're not trying to be very specific with the exact listing of cultivars here, but you'll see it in a minute when we. So that's generally how we've updated these. Also, there's a few blank spaces that we filled in the gaps. A few scratch your head ones like the Sycamore, which had a huge amount of canopy, which is different than the plane trees count. So we edited that one. That's the only one we really edited. Also, there was an odd section. So this is for large, medium, and small trees. But then there was another 2 pages just for flowering trees. We couldn't understand why we had all this emphasis on flowering trees when there's no requirement in city code to provide flowering trees. So this is these pages, we actually consolidated these into a small deciduous tree list. And then finally, the screening trees. This is, again, we kind of thinned some of these out to keep them as simple, but this is what developers are required to have certain element of screening in their plants. And so these are larger and smaller versions of them. And then oddly, these are all at 2-inch caliper trees, which really doesn't make any sense from a shrub standpoint to be a 2-inch caliper shrub. So we had to do some editing in here. So these are basically what we did. There's the first 5 minutes, Brian, and then the second 5 minutes will be on, ta-da, our new Charlottesville Master Tree List. You'll notice these pretty little green dots here. They kind of look like a canopy almost. It's tricky to figure out how to do that in Excel, but we did. And so these are the approved street tree. Before we just had a Y there, but this is just a helpful way to reference for developers if they're looking for what's my quickest street tree location. We've kept the sort of designation of indigenous to region preferred species. We've also kept the sort of non-invasive exotic species, but these are, you can certainly use these, but they're not as preferred. This is not a designation to have preferred trees, but it's a preference. We also have some trees that are limit use trees. The northern red oak has been added to the limit use category, which is less than 15% of the tree list. We've added a designation of less than 15% of the tree list, just to prevent an entire site plan to come through showing all red maples or all red oaks, just because we're really encouraging diversity. But also certain species are overused, and certain ones like northern red oak are actually migrating north due to not coronavirus, but actually global warming, the other major catastrophe happening in the world. But so University of Virginia has taken northern red oak off their planting list because they're really just starting to show signs of stress and decline. So depressing note, but reality in our tree list. So we're just keeping these updated. You'll see our medium canopy tree list. Of note, we added a couple trees in here, but we did a very meticulous cross-reference with, there's an organization called the Casey Trees Foundation based out of DC. They have a exceptional urban tree guide that's for the Mid-Atlantic. So we actually, really referenced a lot of their trees, which ones they noted to be street tree candidates, which ones are suitable for street trees. So this is what they have put together with a lot of experts to kind of create this background of these types of trees and benefits. So we've referenced that in order to how to define which ones are street trees or not street trees. So certain ones just don't tolerate the compaction or the pollution or other things. And you also notice, this is where I talked about before, that the cultivars are sort of listed in the notes now, as opposed to being separately plated over here. Only actually one, of course, this one here, the White Shield Osage Orange. I don't know of any other seedless Osage Orange varieties, so kept that there. I don't know why Green Base is still there either, but that's something that I missed and now I'm seeing in front of everybody. Darn it. But anyway, we have our small trees have gotten much larger because we consolidated all those extra flowering tree lists into this one. So there's a few of those that are street tree candidates for there. And then we finally just, you have these update to these plant list. These were sent to you all if you want to meticulously go through these. There are 2 trees that are potentially confrontational in their placement. And Peggy and I have kind of resolved on the medium tree list. Let's see here. Ginkgo biloba was listed as a medium tree. This is not a medium tree. It grows to be very big with a very big canopy over a long period of time. They're very slow growers. They don't establish a canopy very quickly. It can take easily 20 years to get a canopy of note for a ginkgo. So that's why they were initially put in the medium canopy trees. I think we'll move that back up to large canopy and just have it as maybe a limit use classification there. I'm open to see what other people's take is on that. And the other one is the thornless honey locust. I think we're going to move that one down into the limit use category because it has a ton of disease issues as it gets older. And Mike, I don't know if you had a chance to go through this today, but we would love your comments on this. So if there are other ones that you think really, oh, that's a problem tree, let's move it to the limit use classification. We're really, we'd love to see that. So this is our first pass of this. And if you have any comments, please send them. And that's my 10 minutes.
Exactly 10 minutes. That was great. First of all, thanks for all the work on this. I know that at least the entire last year you were chair, you kept saying, we have to update the master tree list. We have to update the master tree list.
Now that I'm not chair, right?
So this is great. Can you just remind us of how, I know this is part of the Charlottesville tree packet, or it's
yeah. So in your sort of process of, the codes refer to the Charlottesville tree packet for your tree species. So these trees have to be on city site plan. So this is there's a lot of references to the master tree list, which is in the landscape packet. This is the only one that is sort of a required element of the tree packet. The tree packet is a sort of a few, tips about how to plant a tree, how to, right, Mike, is that a good summary? I can pull it up, but.
Yes, that's great. A recommendation. It helps developers, and it's also what I use to plant around the city.
So who presents this to them? How do they, I mean, you say it's a packet, but how do they get this in their hands?
It's available on our website, and people are pretty well about using trees from this list. And if there's issues or with trees that they're planting, we can refer them to this. So it's a really great tool.
Are we considering possibly just broadcasting it out to all the local developers or cadre or something so that people definitely have it and aren't using the old one?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
How do you do that?
But wouldn't it just be, it would be part of the ordinance, the city ordinance?
No, this is kind of, I mean, this goes into the tree packet itself. So I don't know if it would.
Right.
It's not in the ordinances? It's not?
No, I mean, the species is a recommendation. The code is how much canopy they need, right? So, but this is what helps them get there.
And throughout the codes, they're constantly referred to as, you need to have a large canopy tree. So the language that's within this document of large or medium canopy tree, that's in the codes. And so when they're looking for the definition of what that large or medium canopy tree is, they go to this tree packet, and at the very end of this tree packet, there is this tree list, which does ask a good question of, should this live on its own? Like, does it need to be within the tree packet? Would you just simply have the master tree list as an isolated item online? Like, you take it out of the tree packet altogether and just have it live as a separate document, because it is referenced. I'm pretty sure the master tree list is referenced and not the tree packet. Does that make sense, Mike?
Mm-hmm. Right. So I like the tree packet because it's comprehensive. It'll help them how they want to plant, right? And as far as like best practices, I don't see the harm giving them more information if they're trying to pick species, right?
So I want to reiterate what Paul said. This is a work in progress. He's made huge steps, but especially for our new members, we're going to be looking at this again at a future meeting or hopefully soon, right, Paul?
I'd say, I mean, next month, you know, just we can go back and forth with Mike just to see if there's, you know, there's a few tweaks that'll have to happen in the tree packet because of these changes. Like
Yeah.
we'll take out ornamental trees and, you know, that would go away. And
But I
anyway,
would especially encourage our new members, most of whom have backgrounds in arboristry and horticulture and all that, to please share their input between now and that period of time. Again, we're presenting a lot of information tonight because we're trying to catch up, but there'll be another opportunity to look at this. So,
Can I make a quick comment?
yes, yeah,
Oh, okay. Paul, on just a quick thing, because this will come up in Mike's list. Thank you for this. This was a curly, whatever the word is, task that you've taken over. And I know it took a lot of time and thought. But 2 trees on the medium, keep that one up. Is this the medium? Yeah.
it is.
Medium. That you list as medium, Mike has when you'll see his planting list, listed them as shade trees, large trees. So sugar maple is one, and it seems to me that's a large tree, not a medium tree.
That's a good, yeah, no, that one's a mistake. That should be a large tree.
And then the other, the oak, which I don't know, Mike, you listed Quercus
The Nuttall oak?
natalia, Nuttall. I don't
Smaller
know.
oak.
I don't know that tree, but Mike has shown it as a large shade tree. So I don't know.
We had it
Is
as a large shade tree on our prior list, and then the Casey trees downgraded that one to a medium canopy tree. So I just downgraded it in this one. So in the past it was large, and now it's not so large.
Is it indigenous to this? The other question is, it seems like it's a Texas, because another name for it is Texas tree. Is it indigenous?
It is a Texas tree, so you should move that to indigenous region into non-invasive exotic. So that's true.
Yeah, the thornless honey locust, I noticed on Casey tree, they had the honey locust as a good tree, not the thornless. But I mean, I think I agree that should be do limited use, if at all. We recommend it because it gets so many problems. But if you go back to I just noticed on Casey, they don't have the thornless honey locust, they have the honey locust, which has big thorns.
Real big. They look cool though. I mean, I think there's something neat about that, but
But I definitely think we ought to put that one, if we have it at all, on limited use. Because just go out to Stonefield and you'll see the problem.
I will.
okay, we'll
Thanks
work
for
that
letting
out.
us.
We'll work that out in the
I
background.
like that tree.
Thank you,
No, I don't.
Brian.
Okay, so now, Mike, we did really chew into your time. We have a little slack in the latter half of the agenda, so would 25 minutes work for your presentation?
Sure.
Okay. I know the main one is probably the first line item, so.
Mhm. Okay, 1 second. Start with the annual tree planting list. Share my screen. Okay, can everybody see the planting list?
Not yet. Oh, there it is.
Okay, so this is a planting list that we sent out, and this planting list is based entirely on replacements of trees that we've removed this past year. And I took the tree commission comments from last month's meeting along with some other email comments, and I was able to rank these different locations by neighborhood, by sector, as far as park, schools, right of way, cemetery, golf. And then there was another category to weight also if it was right of way versus a street tree and a median, to give it some sort of weight if it was a tree by a sidewalk or trail, to make the community more walkable. And then obviously large canopy trees were weighted more heavy as well. And so basically, once you add all the scores together, it'll rank them. So this is sort of what we came up with. And you can tell I think it reflects, the values of the tree commission, and we're putting large canopy trees in low canopy neighborhoods And I think it's a great tool to help prioritize these places, especially when we're very limited. So are there any questions?
I think I'm really glad you did this, Mike. I think it's, I hope we can eventually do a priority too for trees we want to preserve, and which are the most important trees. But so I think this is along that same line. My only question would be which we talked about last time, the Nuttall or whatever it's called, oak. If that's considered a medium tree, should we, and I think it's in the red oak family, should we do a southern red oak instead or something? Instead of, if we're not going to consider that a large shade tree.
We can substitute something else. You're going to have a hard time finding southern red oak in the trade.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, but we can certainly substitute with another oak or.
I like those white oaks or bicolor, either of those are nice.
I got to remember where that one's going. That's going.
What's the bicolor? I've forgotten.
That's the swamp white oak.
I noticed you have one white. I mean, I'm glad we're doing some white oaks. Do you plant them at a little smaller size because they're hard to kind of transplant, Mike?
We still require 2-inch trees. So, all right, yeah, that one. So that's going to be a tough spot for a white oak, but another oak might be more suitable just because it is a sidewalk tree. And we have concerns about acorns, so we don't want something like a swamp white oak that's going to have lots of acorns, big acorns every year. So, but we can look at that.
But I'm glad you got at least one white oak. I mean, to me, they're the king of the trees. Live the longest, provide wildlife, do all kinds of things. But
Any of our new members have comments or questions or reflections on the list? I think it's great we've reached this point where we have this prioritization.
I was curious about the bald cypress. I know I'm not a new member, but I was wondering about, I mean, I love them, but is that's something that we're able to do with its sort of maintenance involved?
Yeah. So yeah, what do you mean by maintenance involved?
Well, just, I mean, I guess they're just sort of a little bit, messy in places.
Sure. Yeah. Generally they're not an issue where we have larger ones in Charlottesville. They're not really an issue. But yeah, if it was a sidewalk tree downtown, it could be problematic.
Yeah, I find that they're really tough trees and they grow in terrible condition. I mean, you can really plant one anywhere. But to your point, Mark, I mean, if you were to line a street with them, when they do drop the needles, it can be a pretty big mess. So I think if it's just one, I don't really see a problem with it. But if you were doing a whole streetscape, I mean, maybe that needle drop would be pretty offensive to some people.
Right.
Except the needle drop smells wonderful in the fall.
Hey.
One that Brian and I know on 8th Street, which is fantastic. And I love it, but I was just kind of surprised to see it. And that's all the other reason I asked.
Yeah, I like it. I would second Peggy's only comment about, more white oaks. They don't have the same pest threats associated with them that the red oaks have more of, it seems like these days. So I think, not that you're going to get a post oak, but the bicolor, the swamp white oak and the white oak, they're pretty solid. But otherwise, I think this looks great. I'm also a big fan.
And we have to look forward to next year when we have more money. It'll be a longer list.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
and
it's
it's nice. Oh, go ahead.
No, Tim.
Just wanted to say it's nice to see, the 2 highest scoring trees are both in Star Hill, which we learned earlier has such a small area for, increasing the canopy.
Yeah.
Is that first one the replacement for the little leaf linden? Is that like near Tiger Fuels and the brewery right there? What was that, Mike? Sorry.
It's right in the middle of Preston Ave where one was struck by a car.
Yeah, Harris Street.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that was a nice one.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Nice job. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike, did you use the rubric that you gave us last time to come up with these numbers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so essentially, yes, there were some things that, some changes through some emails from the commission as far as weighting. trees that were near sidewalks and trails to give them a little bit heavier weight. But essentially it's the same.
When you presented it last time, I was pretty impressed with the idea of having it so that there would be some quantitative way to come up with some numbers.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you had run into any problems with it. And you just said that you made some changes. So I would think it would be a good idea to give us a copy of the final one. So
Well,
that
that-
when people ask us stuff, we can say, hey, this is how we came, how Mike came up with these numbers and we agree. It's great.
Sure, we can do that. All right. Any other questions? We're ready to move on to the operating budget. All right. Okay, so this is to follow up also on a question that came up last month about how we spend the operating budget. And for those new members, just to reiterate, the new budget is for, the operating budget is for things that aren't tree planting essentially. So pruning, removal, stump grinding. We have this other category, which includes treating trees for emerald ash borer, repairing tree grades, cutting tree grades, replacing signs, the utility-friendly arboretum sign that was damaged, things like that come out of this other category. But this is how the budget was spent for fiscal year 2020. So if you look here, about a third was spent on tree pruning, almost $70,000. About a third was spent on removals. So slightly more at $73,648. And then about 20% or about $40,000 was spent on storm damage. So storm damage, this other category and some grinding, these can vary from year to year based on storm events, how many tree grades we need to cut that year, and just how many stumps we need to grind to get trees replanted and things like that. But these other two categories will vary some as far as pruning and removal, but they're more stable year to year. So for the next fiscal year, we will expect to do, similarly about a third to removals, about a third to pruning, and then, about a third these other categories as well. Like I said, these are the most subject to change. But that's kind of like what we're looking at for the next fiscal year and how we're going to spend the operating budget. Are there any questions with that?
Just could you give a like the pruning? Is this pruning? What's the typical pruning strategy? Is this associated with utilities? Is this associated with a dead limb?
No. So the city doesn't do any utility pruning. That's the responsibility of the utility like Dominion or Comcast. So we don't do any utility pruning. So the pruning we do, a lot of it is safety related. So it's elevating. We do a lot of structure pruning, and it's a lot of removing dead wood and make things safe. That's the bulk of our pruning. Repairing storm damage and things like that also.
Pruning, do you have like a priority list? How do you go about kind of determining what the needs are and just on a procedural basis?
Sure. So a lot of what our pruning we do is reactive. But we do have, when we're able to, if we're working in the area, if we have like, say the elm that we talked about earlier at Clark School, like if we're doing work there that needs to be done, and the elm needs to be pruned as well, we will prune it when we're on site, things like that. So we try to care for our most valuable trees in a way that's most economical to the budget, things like that. So like, for example, the mall trees, they get pruned about every other year, and they need to be pruned again this winter. And that, that's somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000.
Mike, am I on?
Yeah.
The ash trees, they're dying like crazy.
Mhm.
What's that going to do to your budget? I mean, that's.
Yeah. So if I can follow up on, I think it was Paul's question last week here. he had asked about the total. I can't see it. Excuse me.
I mean, I know we asked for more money.
Right. Yeah.
We
So Paul had
did.
asked,
But
that we had asked for $50,000, and I went through and I figured the total for ash removals we spent last year was $3,390, which we're thinking we asked for 50,000. Why didn't we spend that? Why is it not reflected here? And I think that we've kind of deferred some of these larger projects where like things like the crawl garden and there's other trees on the Greenbrier Trail that we've kind of deferred and we have not addressed yet, but those things haven't gone away, if that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, I know on the Rivanna Trail, and it's not city property, but it's maybe a liability for property, but there are so many dead ash trees. I mean, they're really dying fast this year. And they're breaking up fast. That's the problem, it seems.
Right.
Yeah.
Mike, do you keep an inventory of the ash trees? I mean, I know there's one in the parking lot across from South Street Brewery. I know there's, obviously the Crawl Garden has, like 8 dead ash trees in it. Do you keep an inventory of all the ones that you want to target so that if we ever did go to council, we could actually provide a list of like, these are dead trees standing. Here's a photograph. We're not going to take them out until we have the budget.
Sure. Yeah. I could be wrong about this, but I think because we have the 100% inventory that they did in 2008, I believe, and they all have GPS locations like Latin Long, and so there's a list there, and I think I gave that to.
Yeah, we have that online. What we don't have is anything on private property, Paul.
Sure.
And so to really get a sense of impact, we're handling 20% of the data, right?
But this is only really for if we were ever to ask council again for funding for removals. Yeah, I think that'd be most helpful if they were to ever approve it again, even though CIP
we've got
would be.
that data. We've also got that data with all the ash trees, looking at how close they are to existing buildings and other infrastructure. So we can get that. That's easy to calculate. That's not a problem. The challenge is that we only have this much of the real community data.
Hey, Paul, so kind of piggybacking onto your presentation this morning for the tree stewards, with your potential brainstorm idea of sending out a flyer based on the question that somebody asked, I think, to get a sense of private citizens that would want tree plantings. If that does go forward, we could add like a reply box or something for that private citizen to indicate whether or not they have a dead ash on their property. That could provide some data on private citizens.
Yeah, that's a good point. So this, just filling everyone in, this morning the Charlottesville area tree stewards had a meeting, and I presented basically the report that I gave last month at the tree commission. I presented it to the tree stewards just to kind of let them know who we are and what we're up to. And one of the comments that Jeff's pointing out, which was I thought pretty interesting, is in the past with your city utility bill for water and gas, usually you get these little flyers in there occasionally that say something of note. And in the past, we've done those twice for Emerald Ash Borer, just an informational piece of paper that someone gets to say, have your tree treated, these are coming, what to look for. But we could, in theory, make one that talks about the value of planting canopy trees to reduce your energy costs and your utility bills on the, say, south side of your house. So to Jeff's point, you could potentially add other information if you wanted to make it a reply back, or if you wanted to have, notify this box if you wanted to sort of inventory those things. I think inventorying all the ash trees, people sending in things would almost imply like the city's going to take care of it for them. So I'd be a little afraid that there'd be that like, oh yeah, you'll take care of this. But I do like the idea of, using that utility mailer as an opportunity potentially to educate for the future.
My son had about 8 or 12 ash trees around his house, that were all killed quickly up in Leesburg. And he didn't realize it at the time until the tree guys told him, but they get brittle very quickly after they're dead. And I wonder if Charlottesville citizens, if they have ash trees, or have any, have any knowledge about any potential liability for these things coming down when they get brittle quickly after they're dead.
Yeah, and the tricky thing is the costs go up exponentially too for the removals. Once they're brittle, you can't climb the tree, so it becomes way more expensive to take down. But from a liability standpoint, if it falls on somebody's house and nobody raised the alarm about it, it's the person whose house the tree falls on, not the person who owns the tree. Unless you notified that person well in advance to say, your tree is dead, it's falling, it might fall on my property. So, which is rare. So typically if it falls, doesn't matter whose tree it is, it's your responsibility it lands on your property, unless there's been earlier notice. So.
Do we have any significant like groves of them where people aren't aware that they have a lot of trees that are at risk?
We don't know.
Yeah, I think you'd have to drive around the neighborhoods to find out. And I know I have one in my front yard. I see them all around, but yeah, I couldn't tell you.
About 7 or 8 in a row on Sycamore Street in our neighborhood that belong to the Octagon partners next to CFA, but they're not, they're not public.
And there are a lot along the trail in Riverview Park, and not sure what the city's going to do about it because they're on private property, but they're threatening the trail. So I don't know, Mike, have you thought about what's going on there? What do you think?
With the, I'm sorry, my Zoom is cutting in and out. You said on the Riverview Trail, the ash trees you're concerned about?
Well,
on private property?
yeah, I mean, they're on private property, but they're going to be a liability for the trail. I don't know. What's the city going to do about that? I mean, those neighbors are probably, they're way down, away far from their homes, and they're not going to want to, spend the money to take them down.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with what you're talking about. There are a lot of ash trees, and we've kind of dealt with it on a case-by-case basis because there's so much easement for the trail access through there. So we can't get down there and do some work to either side of the trail. So it just depends. But yes, that's going to continue to be an issue.
Well, if they fall down, I guess the city will have to take care of them.
We'll have to, yes, the city will have to clean them up.
Because they'll be the city's now.
Right.
And Mike, to that question, are you tracking fallen ash trees when they do as a candidate for your ash tree total costs?
No, but that would be interesting to look at because it would be a separate category here. It would fall under storm damage. Yeah, but that's hard to categorize. If it's a dead limb or because it has emerald ash borer, or it just fell because of a storm, I don't know how you can quantify that.
Just if it was a dead ash or a dying ash. I mean, you can almost assume every ash that is dying is as a result of emerald ash borer right now.
Sure.
I don't know.
Okay.
Just it might help the argument at the end of the year to say, here are the real costs of deferring this or not addressing it.
Sure.
Other comments or questions? We're at 6:40.
I've been looking at places to handle this kind of community data, and I'm looking at OpenStreetMap. It's a kind of Wikipedia for geospatial data. I'm going to be going to a meeting this evening if anybody's interested, just putting it out there. They'll handle community data, they'll handle large data. So, for stuff that doesn't really fit under the city purview, it may be interesting.
Mike, do you have anything further on this?
No, that's it. I'm ready to talk about the mall tree study whenever we're ready.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
So the mall tree study, if you recall, I believe it was had to be about a year ago. Staff had an internal meeting about separating out the mall tree study from the cultural landscape study. Once again, because we felt that they have different needs, and so that's kind of where the meeting was left. And I am waiting for something from the city management level that says that I can take the mulch tree study and independently create a timeline of things that we need done for the mulch tree study to go out or RFP. So I'm still waiting on that. And with John Blair starting October 1st, I plan on scheduling a meeting with him to speak with him on this.
I know back in the winter, or maybe it was the fall, you suggested that we could sort of weigh in, but since personnel has changed and changing, is there anything that we as the commission sort of should be doing to reinforce our eagerness, or are you fine just going ahead with it on your own?
Well, I would let me meet with John Blair first, and then we'll touch base.
Okay, good. Just keeping this on the agenda. I know we all want to do this, so I'm glad that you'll be able to move forward. And you may have said this, I was looking away for a minute, but do you plan to meet with him before our next meeting? Will you have something to report? Or I know things are crazy, but
I think it would be unlikely that we meet before his next meeting, but like I said, as soon as I can get time.
Well, just keep us up to date. That's great.
Okay.
We are at the general public comment section. So Anson, again, if there's anybody in public that wants to comment through the Zoom webinar, they can raise their hand. If they're using a phone, I think they press, I think it's 9. Do you see anybody out there, Anson, since you're watching? No public comments? Gosh, after last month, I was so excited. I thought we'd quadruple our numbers this month. Well,
Hold on, we got one. We've got some, hold on. We've got Michelle Cormier and Roxanne White. Hold on. So, allowed to talk. Michelle Cormier, go ahead.
Hi, it's Michelle. This is the first time I've attended the tree commission, and I'm a new tree steward from last year when we were still live. And I was wondering why conifers are not considered more. You know, I found that to be true in the tree steward class, and also, you know, I think they're highly underrated, as you know, because they do stay green all year round. For climate change, they make a much larger impact all year round than than other trees do. That's my question.
And just to clarify, you're asking why conifers are not emphasized on the master tree list, and why they're separated into their own category and not really a large canopy tree. Is that correct?
Well, for parks, you know, a lot of places, a lot of trees are placed in parks, and, you know, conifers would be appropriate for parks, I would think. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's an excellent point, and I think it's easy to forget about the conifers when you have a tree list that emphasizes deciduous trees. But you're absolutely right that they're better from a stormwater standpoint because they're, you know, all year round, and there's a lot of value to them from a canopy standpoint. So good observation, and we could probably emphasize those maybe even on this current list if there are park trees available. Mike, any thoughts there?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of our native, like our southern yellow pines, they're very short-lived. They create a lot of maintenance issues as far as grass and things. And I think, especially downtown, some of these street trees, I think we are more suitable for oaks. I think there's definitely an expectation from the community for oaks, things like that. There is, as we said, there's bald cypress on the list too, and this is unfortunately, this year it's a very short list compared to previous years, just due to funding.
There's a beautiful stand of pines over, and I don't know what they are, by that park across from Under the Roof, that used to be Under the Roof Hotel by UVA Hospital. And I think it's fairly old. I don't know how old it is.
Yeah, those loblolly pines are red. Yeah, they're beautiful. Yeah, they're spectacular. That's a very nice grove right across from the corner area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like pines. I'm not against pines. They do live about 70 years or so. They don't have the longest life when you compare it to an oak with 200 to 300 years, but their value is 70 years is still a lot more than a crepe myrtle. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Roxanne?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm here. I didn't want you to think that there wasn't anybody listening to you, because I've been listening, but I had one question, and that was on the master tree list. And I was curious why the London Plains or sycamores were not on that. I know sycamore is probably not on it because of the some of the dirt that comes off of them, or the seeds. But what about the London plane trees?
Actually, they are on there. They may have been lost in the shuffle, but the sycamore is listed under native, so Platanus occidentalis, and then the London plane is a little tricky because it's in the Acer, Acer family. So,
okay.
But they are both on there. One's listed in the indigenous, and one's listed as the the exotic.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see that.
Good question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Roxanne. Anson, you see anybody else out there? Okay, well, we are happy that we had some public members join us. We do have a few minutes left for items, announcements not on the agenda. I know, Peggy, you had a couple of things you wanted to short reports from folks who've engaged with the community.
Yeah, our committee is very busy. A couple of things we're doing. The city is looking at updating their strategic plan. Their first meeting is this month, the 29th. And we want to tell them about the importance of trees and the crisis in this community of losing canopy. Also, we want to let them know about the heat islands, particularly in our low income neighborhoods. The other thing we want to let them know is that, sorry, Jody, the city is making future heat islands because they're not requiring the canopy that will be at least 40%. So Roxanne, who was just on here, and our committee are writing something that we want to make a statement, and so that's going forward. Emily and Anson, I'll let them talk just a minute. I've been on a Zoom conference call about carbon accounting in the community that's being led by the Sustainability Department in Public Works, and we'll let them talk about that. I also was on a Zoom with the NAACP, Environmental Justice Committee across the state, and they are very interested in trees and heat islands and energy use, of course, and the data centers that Anson would know about. But we're hoping to maybe get them involved with us. The other thing we're doing, Anson and Roxanne and I were on a Zoom committee today with a woman from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and what they're doing in Richmond in the South Side to plant trees in the low income area, low canopy area. And that's very exciting. And we're looking to maybe we can do the same thing on a smaller scale in Charlottesville. So those are the things. We've been very busy. So let me, maybe Anson and Emily could give a really short discussion. Just tell us about what happened with the carbon accounting. I don't know, Emily or Anson. Anson.
Well, I'm a new commission member and I have no experience in planning or management of trees. So I might not be the best person to answer this question, but maybe I am. As a lay person, I attended this, and the main point, I guess, that I came away from is just how important it is to inventory the trees that you're adding to your inventory, but also the trees that you're taking away from your inventory in meeting goals for climate stuff. Because It sounds like from what we learned that a lot of communities don't make these inventories a part of their city planning for energy use, and the trees that you add are important, but the trees that you take away, obviously, if you're not keeping track of those in managing energy issues in your community, there's a huge outpouring of carbon that you're not actually accounting for if you're not keeping track of the trees that you lose as part of the energy as part of the carbon that you're putting out into the atmosphere.
Okay, Anson seconds your report. So thank you for joining in. I know I said this at the last meeting, but in the environment, in the world we're living in right now, it's important that we, as individuals representing the commission, be engaged as much as possible. And there are many efforts. We've been sharing a lot of emails. It's really extraordinary how many groups are coming at the whole issue of trees and the environment from different perspectives, but obviously they're all interrelated. So to the extent that we can keep weighing in and keep being heard and reporting back to the commission, I think that's very important. So I want to thank those of you who take the time to do that. It's much appreciated. We are at the point for action items, which I think that Mike and Peggy and I can take that offline. So that leaves us a few minutes. If there's anything that any member of the commission wants to bring up, we want to respect the time of communications staff, so we will adjourn at 7, but believe it or not, we have 7 minutes. Mark?
Since I'm a new guy here, I'm trying to read the minutes and understand them. So as I was reviewing the minutes from last month, I noticed the annual work plan that Mike submitted, and I clearly value everything that I've seen that he's done, but I didn't know if there's a timeline for this, because when I first read it, I thought that he was going to do that for the September meeting. And I thought, how can he do all of that? But there's some items here, like create an outdoor cafe heater use policy, and develop a tree donation policy and all that stuff. Mike, was that a list of things for you for the year? I mean, it says annual work plan, but like, what's the timeline for that stuff?
Yes, that's correct. So those are things I would like to get done in this current fiscal year.
What is
do you
the
make
fiscal
do you make
year?
a do you make a schedule? Fiscal year is what, July to July essentially?
Right.
July 31st. And Mike, for those individual plans, is that something you would check in like in July and be like, all right, I got them all done? Or is it like you stagger them out obviously throughout the year? That's just like that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for some of those other projects, when the season slows down, winter, I have more time to work on those things. That's when I, try to get some of those things checked off my list. But yeah, next year, when I go and reevaluate what my goals will be for the year, I definitely always look at it and see where I left off and what got done and what needs more work.
Okay. Anything else on commissioner minds before we adjourn?
I had just a quick kind of public engagement type question. I noticed that when members of the public find our email address on the internet, we all sort of see what a question is. But I was also kind of curious just how much communication traffic comes directly to Mike. Like, what is the public asking about? And I say this in part because if I'm out walking in my neighborhood, I'm kind of surprised by how many people have brought up the aggressive utility tree trimming, for example. I'm curious about whether we have a sense of the public's interest related to trees, or if there's a level of activity going on out there that of general inquiries about ash trees or anything else that we're not aware of. I just don't remember us sort of talking about this. And I know the city was implementing a tracking system at one point for incoming stuff, but Are we basically seeing it all because it comes on email?
Yeah, that's it. Mike, do you see all the city notes that come through?
What do you, I mean,
Sorry, there's the app, you know, the city app that has, you know, people add their comments. Do you get all the tree related ones for that?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
And do you
People
respond to
call you?
those?
Yes, I respond to them.
Yeah.
And I also, in John May's absence, I get his as well. So it's a lot of mowing, a lot of landscape issues as well. But yes, I see all of my CBO requests if it's green related.
And do you see a pattern of things that may be something we should ever address?
There's really no pattern. It's kind of, it could be anything when it comes through my CBO.
Yeah, I know I made a comment about a storm drain about 2 years ago, and I every 3 months check in to see if anyone checks on my comment, and no one's ever responded. It's been 2 years, so I'm always curious how that app works.
How much of your time does that take, Mike, generally? Like,
It varies throughout the growing season. When the weather's nice, people are outside more, I get a lot more volume of my CBO requests, and some of it is legitimate and some of it is not.
right, right. Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. That's good to know. That's a good question. All right. Well, we are adjourned until October 28th. I want to thank you all for your time and efforts. I want to thank Communications Department for hosting us. And we'll see you.
In your costume, right?
What's that?
In our costumes next month, right? Is that new members? You have to, oh, everyone dresses up. Everyone does it.
No.
We're coming as an invasive
You have
speaker.
to be a tree.
Trick or treating has been officially banned, so there's no parties, no trick or treating.
Trick or treating, yeah. All right.
Peggy's point is good though. We could come as our favorite trees. That you can do. If you want to put leaves on your head, that's fine. So remember, the public is watching.
Remember, we can call it trick or treeing.
Yes.
Okay, Mark gets the last word.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.